Manx Radio's Update with Christian Jones.
Fastamai, good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock on Thursday, the 15th of May. I'm Christian Jones and this is Update. Welcome into 30 minutes of all the latest news, sport and travel compiled from the resources of Manx Radio's newsroom. Tonight, the Head Teachers Union has demanded an urgent meeting with the Education Department, accusing it of forcing out and crushing school leaders. The Health Minister hasn't ruled out changing who would be eligible for an NHS dentist on the island to reduce waiting lists. And the Isle of Man athletics squad are quietly confident about this year's Islands Games. As always, do get in touch if you want to comment on anything you hear. Text WhatsApp to 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. First of all, though, let's get the latest headlines with Siobhan Fletcher.
Fastamai. The Department of Education, Sport and Culture has refuted claims that there is a toxic culture and abusive policies within its walls. It's in response to a letter issued by the National Association of Head Teachers, raising concerns that school leaders are being forced out of their jobs and left crushed. Public access to the former Snaefell mine site has been restricted following the collapse of a retaining wall. The Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture says it's made the decision as a safety precaution following an inspection, and it's not known if access to the site will ever be restored. Changing who is eligible for an NHS dentist on the island to help reduce the current waiting list hasn't been ruled out by the Health Minister. Claire Christian says Manx Care is currently reviewing its criteria and that she wouldn't want to preempt that piece of work. It's hoped the revised Manx Highway Code will be published by the end of the summer. Infrastructure Minister Dr Michelle Haywood says the updated rules will give greater protection to vulnerable road users.
There'll be greater duty of care placed on drivers.
From July, Isle of Man residents will be able to renew or apply for a duplicate driving licence online. This change is just the first step in streamlining services through digitisation. Further afield, Ukraine's president says Russia's not taking peace talks seriously as Volodymyr Zelensky has meetings in Turkey, but Moscow's top leaders are staying away.
We have a mandate to agree certain steps which will lead to the end of the war.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's told reporters that nothing's going to happen until he and Vladimir Putin get together. Police say they're looking for two teenagers over the torture and killing of two kittens in West London. CCTV footage shows a boy and a girl running away from the scene in Ruislip earlier this month. And the UK Chancellor says better than expected growth figures show the strength and potential of the UK economy. Gross domestic product jumped 0.7% between January and March. They're your headlines. I'll be back with your news at 6.
Gurmai, thank you for that, Siobhan. Quick look at the weather now, brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. Remaining fine and sunny this evening, then clear overnight. Light winds generally that may freshen slightly at times overnight. Minimum temperature of around 8 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow, though, lengthy spells of sunshine and light and variable winds. Looks like it's going to be a nice day. Top temperatures of 19 degrees Celsius.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
If you run a small business or just need more room in the back, Philshaw Vehicles has the perfect van or light commercial for all your needs and can sort out any finance. Based in the Tremode Estate, view philshawvehicles.im or call 49 51 49.
A great night's sleep got even better with Zed's Bedding Store. From quality Bell-Dorm bed linen and mattress protectors, fleece and woven throws to luxury duvets from the fine bedding company, Zed's Bedding Ramsey, next to Isle of Man Bank.
SMS Trading have moved to 3 St Paul's Square, Ramsey. For flat pack to fully built, new or second-hand furniture, SMS Trading offer all-island delivery and man-in-a-van service. Call 315151 or find SMS Trading on Facebook.
At Begode Cattery, we have been caring for animals for over 50 years. As a cattery, we care for customers' cats and treat them as our own. Contact Begode Cattery on 676 947 or find Begode Cattery on Facebook.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
4 minutes past 5 now, and a senior union official says he's written to the Education Minister in a bid to head off a potential dispute. The National Association of Head Teachers is seeking an urgent meeting with the Education Minister Daphne Kane and her Chief Officer. The The NAHT describes the relationship between schools and civil servants as toxic and broken, and adds it won't stand by while school leaders are forced out and left crushed. Those comments were made in a series of tweets by the union's Assistant General Secretary. Before we come to him, let's get some thoughts from the former Education Minister, Julie Edge. The union says a toxic and broken relationship. What do you think it means by that?
I was quite shocked, to be honest, because the relationships between the unions take significant amount of time and energy from myself when I was minister to rebuild that trust. And it sounds to me that's been that trust and relationship of working with the unions for the best in education for all of our staff, employees and our young people's futures seems to have broken rather quite quickly. The language that's being used is strong, and I'm sure that's for a very good reason. But when we worked, unions have been in dispute with education for over 8 years, and we managed to build that trust and relationship back. It needs really good, strong leadership, and it looks to me that there's been an issue, certainly that possibly it's been through the validation process or something that's really damaged that significantly, and it's really disappointing.
Like you've alluded to, the language being used is strong. The union says the relationship between schools and civil servants is toxic and broken, which suggests there are cultural issues. Those don't tend to form overnight, though. Do you think perhaps there were any such cultural issues in place when you were the minister?
I think the advantage of when I was minister, was the fact I knew an awful lot of the people because they were previous work colleagues, and I had worked in education on leadership teams for such a significant time that I would probably hear of situations before they got to that point, and I could then enable a different situation possibly with officers. The toxicity is really disappointing to hear. We had Beamans, we had all the changes, and it was all about building these relationships and the culture. Things were going in the right direction. So what has catastrophically broken? I really don't know.
Former Education Minister Julie Edge reacting there. Well, let's bring the union in question into the conversation. We're joined now by the Assistant General Secretary at the NAHT, Rob Kelsall. First of all, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. And like we just heard there, the former Education Minister says she really doesn't know what has catastrophically broken. Perhaps you can enlighten us. What is the situation?
Well, it beggars belief, actually, that we're back to square one at desk. I truly had believed, and I was there at the time, that the lessons learnt following the Beerman's report in 2020 had been learnt, and that obviously pointed out to the culture and behaviours of officers within desk. But it seems from a meeting I had with school leaders on the Isle of Man yesterday that the rot has well and truly set back in. It cannot be acceptable that in the environment in which we work, that we've got school leaders who are in fear for being shouted down and told not to speak to their union. And we've got examples of school leaders who've been suspended for over 10 months, whilst an independent investigation was undertaken. That investigation, or those investigations, concluded just recently that there wasn't a case to answer. Yet rather than getting those school leaders back to doing the job that they so dearly love, they're facing yet further baseless allegations. And of course, that culture and that fear is certainly one that we need to get to grips with.
And in one of your tweets, you've said, we will not see school leaders forced out of their jobs and left crushed. You've also retweeted an article about the Rosalind Ranson payout and commented lessons were not learned. Are you anticipating a similar situation arising here?
Well, there's striking similarities with the former Chief Medical Secretary in the Isle of Man. And of course, whilst we will also look to legal means, of course, school leaders won't stand by and see their colleagues crushed in the way that they're seeing that rolled out at the moment. So we're playing with the Minister, with the Chief Executive, to sit with us, with the Manx Industrial Relations Service, and try and find a way to put this right. We want, of course, those injustices to be put right. We also want a sweeping and further review into that culture within DESK, because again, we cannot go back here to the culture that we saw back in 2020, and hopefully our calls for that urgent meeting will be heard.
And just lastly, you've asked for a meeting with the Education Minister and the department's chief officer. Have you had a response?
I've had a holding response. I think it's fair to say that they are reviewing the situation. I expect from a discussion with Manx Industrial Relations Service today that a meeting is imminent, and let's hope that common sense prevails and that we can get on with delivering that first-class education service for the children and young people on the Isle of Man.
Rob Kelsall, thank you for joining us. That was the Assistant General Secretary at the NAHT Union. Now, earlier today, we received a statement from the Department of Education, Sport and Culture in response. Simon Richardson is with us now. Fastamai, what has the department had to say?
Fastamai, Christian. Well, the department says it's aware of the letter from the NAHT and acknowledges the seriousness of the concerns. But it completely refutes the allegations, including claims of a toxic culture and abusive policies.
And did they give any more detail about the background?
Not much really, Christian, only that the concerns relate to an internal matter which has been ongoing for some time. They say it would be inappropriate to comment further to protect fairness and confidentiality, but they do stress their commitment to working constructively with all the teaching unions.
Thank you, Simon. And of course, we will bring you any further updates as they develop in the days and weeks ahead.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
11 minutes past 5 now, and a former Ramsey commissioner says it's important to raise awareness and stand up to people who make misogynistic and racist comments online. Lamara Crane, who's also the leader of the Isle of Man Green Party, was subject to hateful comments on social media during her term as a local authority member. She's been speaking to local democracy reporter Emma Draper.
The Green Party in the Isle of Man stands up to racism, misogyny and any injustice. So it's really important for the party to stand up and make issues like this known and people aware of the fight that we are fighting and raise awareness and also spread the word of how tolerance and empathy are so important in our society. So it's really important to stand up against people who say misogynistic things, who say racist things, and potentially they don't even realise actually what they're saying is deemed as misogyny or racism.
I know that the comments were directed at you, and I know this is something you've dealt with quite a lot as well when you were a commissioner. Is this one of the reasons why you decided it was time to leave?
Yeah, it was a combination of things why I decided not to stand again for Ramsey Town Commissioners. I'd already done nearly 4 years. I felt like I had achieved a lot, but there was more to be done. However, that is possible from the sidelines. But I felt like it was time to take a break from that and allow other people to get involved. But yes, having been a commissioner and been subjected to the kind of abuse that I have been subjected to has been difficult. It's taken a toll on my mental health.
There's been elections now, and there's a new set of commissioners across the island that have been elected. What advice would you give to those who might be a bit worried or who might end up on the receiving end of some of these comments?
You're not alone in the abuse that you receive for trying to make the world a better place from your viewpoint, and that you're not the problem. You should be able to speak up and be able to hold your ground without being personally attacked and personally abused or harassed, and that we are stronger when we're together, and you can reach out to other politicians. Take time away from social media if you need to. You can block people if you need to. You can step away when it's toxic, but protect your mental health because it's so important, and we need you to keep on going and standing up for what's right and not be ground down by people that spread hate.
That was the leader of the Isle of Man Green Party, Lamara Crane, former Ramsey Commissioner too, speaking about standing up to abusive comments on social media. 14 minutes past 5 now, and the Health Minister has not ruled out changes to NHS dental eligibility on the island as efforts continue to cut the waiting list. Currently, there are 6,254 people waiting to be allocated to a dentist. Manx Care says it's now in a position to standardise how it pays dental providers and introduce contractual changes aimed at improving access. But in the House of Keys, Claire Christian, the Health Minister, stopped short of confirming whether tightening eligibility will be necessary to achieve that.
There are currently 7 contractors delivering NHS dental services from 9 practices across the island. Manx Care also have a salaried general dental practice Hillside and the community dental service. There is currently a waiting list for patients who wish to access the NHS dentist. And in response to the mandate, Manx Care's operating plan 25-26 aims to assure that the units of dental activity, which is UDA, delivered as a proportion of a contracted activity will be at least 96%. Manx Care has commenced work to unify the UDA value that will increase the NHS dental activity and allocation to NHS dental contractors, which supports our health service taking a fundamental step forward to addressing the long-standing waiting list and allocation issue. Manx Care are seeking a different approach to address the waiting time, which looks at changes to how dental contractors are paid. By unifying the unit of dental activity rate, Manx Care will create the incentive for dental contractors to take on patients and significantly reduce the waiting list.
Does the Minister think that is possible to achieve without restricting the access criteria to dentistry?
So the Honourable Member, I can't answer that today. Yes, with the eligibility criteria that it currently stands, this is something that we do absolutely have to review and are reviewing as that piece of work. So I wouldn't want to anticipate something until I've seen that full piece of work. And I hope the Honourable Member understands that I wouldn't want to commit to something or say something here today that would be inaccurate.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Couple of things to be aware about on the roads today, just a small handful of things. In Douglas, there are temporary lights on the Newcastle Town roads between the Springfield Roads and Annika Lane junctions, 24 hours a day for repairs to a collapsed wall. Also in Douglas, there are temporary lights on Alexander Drive at the junction with Woodlands Crescent. That's for gas main repairs. And of course, more temporary lights on Summerhill. This one's been going on for quite a while now, near the bottom of the hill, and that's all day for gas work. Of course, if there is anything that we haven't covered today that you spot while you're out and about, please do let us know 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com, as long as it's safe to do so. Over at the Steam Packet, everything is looking fine there. And if we look at the airport now, on the departures board, the 5:15 Manchester, that's delayed by 15 minutes. Also the 6:55 London Gatwick, that's delayed until just after 7:30. And on the arrivals board, just at 4:45, the 4:45 from Manchester, that's due to be landing at 5 o'clock.
Quayside Tyres and Service Centre with 1 year's free engine warranty from Castrol. Get more with You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
Approaching 18 minutes past 5 now, and public access to the former Snaefell mine site has been restricted. Follows the collapse of the retaining wall last month. The details from Lewis Foster.
An inspection of the site has taken place, and the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture says it's made the decision to close off access as a safety precaution. Engineers found significant risks across several historic structures, including collapsed masonry, unstable walls and eroded footpaths. DEFA Minister Claire Barber says the site must be placed off limits as the collapse has compromised the stability of key areas and poses a significant risk to public safety. All access is being restricted with signage and diversions installed ahead of the TT to prevent spectators entering hazardous areas. On the slopes of Snaefell Mountain near Laxey, the mines were established in 1856 to extract lead and other materials. The site was once part of the Great Laxey Mining Company's operations, with the mine workings reaching depths of more than 1,100 feet before closing in the early 20th century. It was briefly reactivated in the 1950s for spoil reprocessing, after which it was permanently closed. Well, looking ahead, government says future access to the site will depend on the availability of funding for extensive remediation work, which may require a capital bid. If funding cannot be secured, it says the site may remain permanently closed off. It's promised that a report explaining the risks and reasons for the closure will be published shortly.
Lewis Foster with our report there, thank you. Now, the revised Manx Highway Code is expected to be out by the end of the summer. The updated version aims to give more protection to vulnerable road users, that's cyclists, motorcyclists, pedestrians and horse riders. There's also new guidance for cyclists, including where they should position themselves on the road and how to ride in groups. Infrastructure Minister Dr Michelle Hayward says many people are already following the changes.
The shift in the highway code is really about those who are most at harm from activities around highways are the ones that we protect most. And if you are a vehicle driver, you are the person who can cause the greatest harm. So while you're in your 1.5 tons of metal box pootling along, you are not the person that's going to be injured in a collision with a pedestrian as much as the pedestrian is. So, and even within that group of vulnerable road users, when we look at just pedestrians, we can say there are some groups within there that are more vulnerable. So the young, the elderly, the disabled all count as more vulnerable road users. And so there'll be greater duty of care placed on drivers to protect other people.
I did have a conversation with a driving instructor earlier today who said they had concerns over the rule which says pedestrian crossing or about to cross side roads have the right of way over vehicles or cyclists that are entering or exiting the side road. They say this will inevitably lead to rear-end collisions, not to mention the potential danger of when turning right into a side road. Are you sure this point has been well thought through in that regard?
That's actually been the law now for a number of years in the UK and in Northern Ireland. I was in Northern Ireland recently and I stood and waited at the side of a road for the traffic to come past and got waved across furiously by the driver who knew that they had to give way for me. Obviously, if you are turning into a side road as a driver, A, you will be indicating, and so the other road users around you should be aware of the fact that you're about to turn and will be slowing down to do so. And B, they should be watching what's going on. So I don't accept that.
Infrastructure Minister Dr Michelle Hayward speaking to Lewis Foster there. Now, the UK Marine Accident Investigation Branch has issued an interim report into the sinking of a super yacht owned by the Isle of Man company Rev Tom Limited that sank in a freak storm in Italian waters, with the loss of 7 lives. The Bayshon capsized and sank half a nautical mile off the Porticello on the 19th of August last year. Simon Richardson is back with us now and has this report.
A Met Office study and local observations indicated the probable presence of a transient hurricane with winds in excess of 64 knots at the time of the accident, which may have caused the vessel to heel over beyond the so-called angle of vanishing stability. Among the 7 people who perished in the Bayshon tragedy were tech tycoon Mike Lynch and his teenage daughter Hannah. The vessel had 22 people on board at the time of the sinking, which is still subject to an ongoing criminal investigation in Italy. As a result, the MAIB says access to the wreck and other material elements of primary evidence have been restricted. The ongoing safety investigation is considering all aspects of the accident to determine its cause and circumstances. These include Bayshon's design, stability, escape routes, operation and emergency procedures. Until the final report is published, the interim report should be taken as indicative of the circumstances of the accident.
Simon Richardson with that report there, approaching 23 minutes past 5. There's quite confidence, it seems, that the recently announced Isle of Man athletics squads for this year's Island Games can be competitive and potentially enjoy success. Local athletics correspondent Dave Griffiths believes that whilst nearly half the team will be Games debutants in Orkney, those coming in are more than capable of holding their own on the big stage.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
We've actually, of the 24 athletes, there are 11 debutants altogether. And in fact, 5 of the 6 half marathon runners are debutants as far as the Island Games is concerned. But we should say they're all very experienced athletes who won't be remotely fazed about the level of competition. And I think the teams are looking strong.
Elsewhere across the squad that already have that Island Games experience, and some of them are still quite young as well. So they'll have picked up some valuable traits from when they went to Guernsey just under 2 years ago.
Yes, absolutely. When we were in Guernsey 2 years ago, we had a very young and inexperienced squad because it was the first Island Games for 4 years. They all acquitted themselves brilliantly. Not just the people like Regan Corrin and Corrin Leeming who won gold medals on their debuts, but also the other young debutants who maybe didn't win medals, but they just gained so much experience. They acquitted themselves superbly all through the week, not just in competition, but just the way they approached the whole week. And I think the 2 years experience that they've had since then will make a huge difference.
Away from that, we'll just have a think about some of the names that aren't there. There are some notable names that won't be involved.
Well, there are, yeah. I mean, I feel really sorry for the athletes who who have been building up for the Island Games, particularly the potential debutants who have had to withdraw through injury. There are one or two of those, but hopefully they're on the road to recovery. And, this event comes around every 2 years. So I hope they can stay motivated and, focus on the Faroe Islands in 2 years' time. But yeah, we're missing Ollie Lockley from the half marathon. But again, we have some very able replacements there. One notable absentee is Rachel Franklin, who will be missing for the first time since she made her debut in 2007. She's on the way back from injury, and hopefully in 2 years' time she'll be back as well. But I think we should say that all the athletes who have been picked are more than capable of filling the gaps, and I think it'll be a very competitive squad in Orkney in July.
Local athletics correspondent speaking with Manx Radio's sports editor Rob Pritchard there. And Rob joins us now in the studio with more sports. Faster my Rob.
Faster my Christian. Starting with football, Braddon have secured a domestic treble for the season after beating Douglas High School Old Boys 4-1 last night to lift this year's Paul Henry Gold Cup. Well, the Swans led at the ball in Douglas through a close-range Mark Hutton strike on 23 minutes and doubled their advantage when Liam Kane struck home in first half stoppage time. Braddon asserted their dominance further in the second period through an Alex Ringham own goal 11 minutes after the restart, before Old Boys got on the score sheet through Jacob Stones after a Braddon defensive mix-up. But any hopes of a late Old Boys comeback were quashed with 14 minutes left as Dan Kinraid sealed the contest with Braddon's fourth, curling home from around 15 yards. Well, last night's result means Braddon have secured a trio of trophies this campaign, having already been crowned Ardern and Drug Unlimited Division 2 champions in late March and winning the GH Cornet Woods Cup on Easter weekend last month. Well, sticking with football, FC Isle of Man have been provisionally confirmed as remaining in the North West Counties Football League Premier Division system for the 25-26 season. The news announced today by NWCFL officials comes following confirmation of initial league allocations by the FA Leagues Committee for the next season. For the third season running, the NWCFL Premier Division is also expected to be a 24-team division, with 2 teams promoted and 2 relegated into the league. All allocations remain subject to appeals, and the constitution will be ratified at the NWCFL's League AGM, taking place on the 21st of June this year. And finally, in motorsport, sidecar racer George Holden will make his TT debut this year alongside experienced passenger Mark Wilkes. Son of 2-time TT winner John Holden, George will join forces with former Snaefell Mountain course podium finisher Wilkes on the Barnes Racing DMR Yamaha outfit, which has been built by 17-time TT winner Dave Molyneux. And this update comes after it had previously been announced late last year that 32-year-old Holden was initially due to take on this year's racing fortnight with passenger Jake Roberts, and it also marks a change of circumstances for Wilkes, who was previously due to be with Tim Reeves, who's since withdrawn from the meeting.
Thank you very much, Rob. That is up for update this evening. Thanks very much to newsreader Siobhan Fletcher. Remember, if there is anything you heard this evening that you want to hear in a bit more detail, do head on over to manxradio.com. All those stories are more in more detail, plus our Manx Newscast too, where you can hear interviews in full and in more depth. Up next is Island Life Special, looking back at the highlights from the 80th anniversary of VE Day. Chris Kinley is up after that with Greatest Hits, and he'll be followed by Maurice Powell. But last but not least, of course, it's After Hours with Rhiann Evans. Beth is back with you tomorrow, so until next time, take care, bye-bye for now.